quote-unquote normal, quote-unquote disabled, non-disabled. Let us raise our own voices. You have to go and amplify it because no two experiences of disability are same. And there is no end to these challenges, right? Inclusion is not rocket science. Disabled people are not talking enough about disability inclusion.
This isn't about overcoming, it's about owning it. Welcome to Disability.
Hi, this is your host, Rolif Cornelio, bringing to you another podcast at ThisAbility. Today's podcast is about bridging the gap between education and employment. And today's guest is someone who beautifully blends passion, purpose, and advocacy, Aarushi Gambhir. Aarushi is a passionate disability inclusion strategist on a mission to make classrooms truly inclusive, from leading UNODC-backed initiatives to helping educators and institutions understand the needs of children with disabilities. She's turning advocacy into action, one student at a time. Today, she's here to talk about bridging the gap between education and employment. It's my pleasure, Aarushi, to welcome you.
Thank you, Rolif. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. Thank you so much, Aarushi. Before we start, maybe if you can tell the viewers and the listeners a little bit about yourself and your journey.
Right. So thank you first of all for having me once again. I am the founder of Enable Education, which is an initiative backed by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. It's an initiative that we started back in January last year with the sole purpose of creating awareness about the needs of students with disabilities in schools and colleges. So we do educator sensitizations, and most importantly, we do student sensitizations to teach them how to include their peers with disabilities in the classroom. I'm also a published author, and I've also worked with a lot of publications with writing on different aspects of the lives of people with disabilities.
Very interesting. Interesting to hear that you are sensitizing not only educators and institutes, but also students. Can you tell me a little bit more on that?
Sure. So why students? Initially, when we started the project, the sole primary target audience was teachers, educators. Why did we shift to students? Because I realized in the course of my journey that children are born with clean slates. They're not born with discrimination in their heads. They're not born with preconceived notions about people, about society, about anybody. It's mainly the adults in their growing up formative years who, give them certain notions of what it means, quote-unquote normal, quote-unquote disabled, non-disabled. Those notions are given by adults to them. And if we are able to break that in the child's formative years, say even at the age of 10, at the age of 12, it is imperative because they are able to learn and imbibe that, we have to include everybody in the classroom. We have to, create a safe space for everybody in the classroom, and that people may be different, but at the end of it, everybody has the same social needs.
Well, it's amazing. I mean, growing up, I didn't have that opportunity of being educated while I was in my classroom. So it's great that you're doing that for the generation to come. You mentioned a little bit about your own journey. So maybe tell us what gives you the right or the position to say that you are an advocate.
Sure. So I am a person with a disability. I have a locomotor impairment. That is one part of it. That's just the tip of the iceberg. The fact that I have lived experience with disability, one, that makes me the most qualified to talk about it, rightfully so, because I have been there. I have been at the end of that discrimination or that isolation that it feels to, be in a classroom, in a space where you're not included, in a space where people, maybe they want to include you, but they don't know how to do so. Now, that's one part of it. Number two, I have been associated with the community, with people with disabilities for over 4 years now. So in different capacities, right from employment opportunities to education, to having the opportunity and the honor to guiding my juniors, people younger to me in their school lives. How do they advocate for themselves? How do they speak up for themselves? That makes me the most qualified because I have had the opportunity and the space to go and speak to people in the community, to go and speak to people and understand what it means for them to be living with a disability in India, because no two experiences of disability are same.
Right. Amazing. So maybe as you're speaking about experiences, was that something that you experienced, that you went through, that maybe tipped the scale and said that, okay, now I need to start advocating?
So, my entire school life was one battle after the other, to put it lightly, right?
Okay.
So it felt like I was the problem. I grew up feeling like maybe I did not fit in, maybe I needed to change myself, maybe I needed to do something differently just to become a part of that, peer group, just to be like them. And then college happened, graduation happened, and suddenly I was in an environment that was completely accessible. I was going alone completely to college, and with professors, with faculty who saw me for the skills I had, for the capabilities I possessed, who had me involved into things not because I had a disability or for tokenistic purposes, but because they knew I was capable of handling leadership positions. And that tipped it for me, because I realized, okay, the things I grew up normalizing in the form of discrimination from peers and teachers, knowingly and unknowingly, consciously and unconsciously, were not normal. It was not supposed to happen. That was not supposed to be the way it was.
Wow. I mean, yeah, that's actually deep, right? Because I think as you grew up in school, you felt that it is normal to feel the way you felt, which is being left alone or not part. But I think college is where it tipped for you. What do you think the college did in terms of why were they more inclusive as opposed to the schools being the way they were?
I don't know, because I've understood in my journey of advocacy, inclusion is not rocket science, to put it lightly, right? It is you letting the person be the way they are. It is you embracing them for their own personhood, and not disregarding the disability, but accepting it as a part of that person, not the entire person, not the only thing that their own personhood is about, right? That is what college gave me the space to have. Even if I had to go to, say, my college counselor for certain issues that I faced, right? She would listen to me, she would provide a solution. That would be the end of it. I did not have to keep mulling over the same issue over and over and over again. And also because I did not have to bring up the same things over and over and over again. Right. Because if there was an issue once, it would be rectified. And I wouldn't have to beat around the bush and, sugarcoat my own discomfort to make them comfortable. That was not how it worked. Right. If it was concerning, it mattered. And because there was it was a space where my voice mattered, it goes without saying that it made me a lot more comfortable in my own skin as well.
Super. Were there other students with disabilities in the college that you were in, or were you one of the few?
No, not with locomotor impairments at least.
Interesting.
So there were students with, learning disabilities, minor learning disabilities, all of that. And the good part about college was I actually got into the equal opportunity cell at day one. Wow. That concept was there since day one, and my counselor made me meet other students with disabilities, not thinking that they'll somehow become best friends for life at day one, right. But just to give me a sense of these are your seniors, they had problems, they were helped out, so will you. And that example made it a lot easier for me to reach out to people also, because I was also again not used to reaching out to people freely and talking about what I faced.
Right, amazing. So what are some of the challenges that you're seeing today around disability and around inclusion of people with disabilities that you feel you want to change?
There are several, and there is no end to these challenges, right? But I think the one thing that we need to start addressing is that non-disabled people are not talking enough about disability inclusion. There is, again, of course, there is lack of understanding. That is a given, that is said, that is there, right? But at the same time, I don't understand why we, the non-disabled community or the non-disabled majority that there is, they are not able to understand that unless there is an amalgamation of people with and without disabilities who come together, raise their voice against inaccessibility and discrimination, we are not going to be going much farther in our journey of disability inclusion. Right? Why? Because majoritarianism works. It's there. You see any marginalized community, and it's not about support. It's about coming together. One is, we want to help you raise your voice. No.
Right.
Let us raise our own voices. You have to go and amplify it, because you have the means, you have the seed, you have the resources, maybe better resources, to go and amplify that. So, for example, if I am facing an issue with a ramp, most shops and markets don't have a ramp.
Right.
If every non-disabled person that went to this shop told the owner, why do you not have a ramp? Why are people with disabilities not able to access your shop? I am pretty sure there is going to be a point when this shop people will be like, okay, let's do it. Because of course, if so many people are telling me, there is a need for it, right?
Right.
And that is, I think, one of the biggest challenges that we are facing, and that's one reason why we are so far behind when it comes to actual inclusion in practice right now.
So it's a very good point. I think, from the several points, you brought it down to one, which is how do we get the non-disabled community to speak more and amplify the voices of the people with disabilities. The question is, why should they care, or why should they do something about it?
Why should the non-disabled community do?
Yes.
Because it's also imperative to understand disability is not linear. And disability is not just only congenital meaning by birth, right? Anybody can have a disability at any point in their lives.
Right.
There is accidents, there is lifestyle diseases, there is a whole lot of other things. And not even that. A country that believes in the concept of respecting its elderly population, you are depriving of that elderly population of access to a lot of places in their old age.
Right.
Why do you think there is so much loneliness in old people? Because they are not able to access places. They are not customed, the places are not built for these people as well. Because if this person is a wheelchair user, how are they going to access, say, a temple? For that matter, right? How are they accessing a shop? How are they accessing a friend's house? Right? So, that's one part of it. And I think the larger reason that I would give why you should care is because it's the right thing to do. And inclusion is no longer a choice. It's an imperative to become a global power.
Right. So speaking of global powers, something interesting that's happening today is, the US, which is one of the largest economies, is talking about why inclusion is actually just a buzzword and should be put in the trash bin. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on that are very simple. My thoughts on that are that without inclusion, you're not going to get much farther. You are actually doing away with a very vital, a very big, a very important human resource. And see, there is one resource that is created in colleges and institutions. There is another human resource that life creates. And I am not talking from a very emotional perspective. I am talking about the fact that being a disabled person in a country that is practically designed for your exclusion teaches you how to live, how to work around things, teaches you how to live, teaches you how to create your own systems that work for you, because of course the world is not working for you. Right. So there is a term in Hindi, jugaad, right?
Right.
Our entire existence is based on jugaad.
Right.
The cars, for example, very simple example, right? Cars abroad are customized for needs of people with disabilities, wheelchair users, for their own personal usage that they can use independently, right? In India, there is no such scenario, and even if it exists, it's very expensive.
Right.
What do I do as a disabled person to get into my car? I use a plank. It's a random makeshift plan that my dad stumbled upon years ago, and that's how we've been polishing using it randomly to get in and out of the car. because it's not practical for my parents to constantly help me in and out of things.
Correct.
They are getting old, they are getting they are, they are aging, they have their own problems. So one is that. Second is the fact that skill development, you live in a economy, you live in a world which is largely online, and there is no dearth of courses, there is no dearth of skill development in the online world.
Right.
My skills as a writer, how did I become a published author? I was a nobody 18-year-old. I started writing pretty randomly, took courses on Coursera in the middle of COVID, ended up becoming a published author to over 10 books, ended up writing for some of the biggest platforms in the country right now.
Wow.
So they know how to develop their skills, college or not, right? And they have degrees. Let's not think that they've not access education. Yes, the higher education numbers for people with disabilities in India are poor, abysmally poor, but they still have degrees. I have seen so many during my brief stint with a firm that helped in recruiting people with disabilities to different companies. I've seen so many people, good colleges, good degrees, MBAs, sitting at home because they are not able to find an employer that accommodates them.
Right.
That's ready to do the bare minimum of accommodations.
Right.
And so that is one of the issues.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
So there are two things that stood out to me in what you said. I'll pick one at a time. I think the first one is that you mentioned that today technology, the access to it, everyone has it. I can sit at home and learn what I want to learn, right? Now, interestingly, in my experience in this space, right, when I talk to companies and people trying to speak to them and say hire people with disabilities, the very first question they ask me is, what is it that they can do? Almost assuming that disability is binary, meaning if you have disability, you can't do anything, and if you don't, right? How do you answer people like these, or these kinds of questions?